The massive display screen in the Galactic Council chamber showed hundreds of red dots moving steadily through the star map. Each dot represented a swarm ship, and with each passing hour, more peaceful worlds fell silent. The council members watched in horror as another colony's distress signal went dark. High Counselor Reed, his blue-tinted skin pale with worry, turned to face the other representatives. "We have lost contact with the Stellar Defense Force. Their fleet." He paused, his three-fingered hand shaking as he gestured at the screen. "Their fleet is gone." The chamber erupted in panicked whispers. The Stellar Defense Force had been their strongest military unit, with ships built from technology refined over thousands of years. If they couldn't stop the swarm, what hope did anyone have? In Earth's orbital command center, Captain James Walker stood at attention as his superior officer read the emergency transmission from the Galactic Council. The message was simple: they needed help, and they needed it now. "Captain," General Thompson said, looking up from his tablet, "the Thunder is the only ship we have that's ready for combat. She's experimental, untested in real battle conditions, but she's all we can send right now." He walked to the window, staring at the massive warship docked outside. Its hull gleamed in the sunlight, its unusual design making it look more like a sea creature than a traditional spacecraft. Walker nodded. "The crew is ready, sir. We've trained for this." He didn't mention that their training simulations had never included facing an enemy that had just destroyed an entire alien fleet. Some things were better left unsaid. The Thunder was humanity's first attempt at building a warship using their own design philosophy, instead of copying alien technology. While other species built their ships like floating fortresses, humans had looked to Earth's oceans for inspiration. The result was a vessel that moved like a manta ray through space, its hull plates shifting and flowing like scales. As Walker walked through the ship's corridors toward the bridge, he felt the familiar excitement before a mission, mixed with healthy fear. The crew they'd picked was young by alien standards. Most species thought humans rushed their officers into command too quickly. But Walker knew that youth often meant flexibility, and flexibility was what they'd need against the swarm. "Captain on the bridge," First Officer Tom Miller announced as Walker entered. The bridge crew stood at attention, their faces showing a mix of determination and nervousness. "At ease," Walker said, taking his command chair. "Navigation. Do we have the coordinates from the Council?" "Yes, sir," replied Lieutenant Anna West from her station. "The swarm fleet is moving through the Centauri Gap. If we use the new drive system, we can intercept them before they reach the next populated system." Walker looked at his crew, 20 humans about to face an enemy that had already destroyed ships crewed by beings who had been traveling space since before humans invented the wheel. But where those ancient species saw combat as a matter of following time-tested formations and strategies, humans had learned different lessons from their own wars. "Engineering, how's our point defense origami system looking?" Walker asked. Chief Engineer Mark Davis's voice came through the comm system. "All plates are responding perfectly, sir. The quantum fold matrices are aligned and ready for geometric deployment." Walker smiled. The aliens had laughed when humans suggested using folding energy fields for defense. They'd stopped laughing during the demonstration, when the Thunder had survived shots that would have torn through conventional shields. "All stations, prepare for departure," Walker ordered. "We're about to show the galaxy why they shouldn't underestimate Earth." The Thunder's engines hummed to life, their unique resonance making the ship feel alive. As they pulled away from the station, Walker thought about the responsibility on their shoulders. Humanity was the youngest species in the Council, seen as barely more than clever primitives by some. But sometimes being young meant being willing to try things the older species would never consider. "Helm, set course for the Centauri Gap," Walker commanded. "Let's introduce ourselves to the swarm." As the Thunder accelerated away from Earth, its hull plates shifted in the sunlight, rippling like waves on an ocean. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers would soon learn that sometimes the most effective weapon wasn't the biggest ship or the most advanced technology. It was the unpredictable creativity of a species that still looked at the universe with wonder and wasn't afraid to try the impossible. The Council observation post buzzed with nervous activity as the sensors detected a new ship entering the combat zone. The alien observers crowded around their screens, their various appendages tapping rapidly on control panels as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "Only one ship?" Observer Lee Gray asked, his eye stalks swaying in disbelief. "The humans sent a single vessel against the swarm." He turned to his assistant, who was frantically checking the sensor readings. "There must be some mistake. Check for cloaked vessels or hidden reinforcements." "No mistake, sir," the assistant replied. "Long-range scans confirm it's just one ship. The Thunder, they call it." He paused, adjusting his instruments. "But sir, these readings, they don't make any sense. The ship's hull, it's moving." In the depths of space, the Thunder glided silently toward its destination. The swarm fleet ahead looked like a cloud of angry hornets, their ships moving in perfect, predictable patterns. Captain Walker stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as the distance between them shortened. "Status report," Walker called out, his voice calm despite the tension filling the bridge. "Swarm ships are maintaining their formation," Lieutenant West reported from her station. "They haven't reacted to our presence yet. Either they don't see us as a threat, or," she left the sentence unfinished, "or they're waiting to see what we'll do." Walker completed her thought. "Well, let's not disappoint them." Engineering. Begin the hull transformation sequence. Back at the observation post, the aliens watched in fascination as the human ship began to change. Its smooth hull started splitting and shifting, plates moving like the scales of a fish, creating patterns that seemed to bend the very light around them. "Impossible," one of the scientific observers muttered, his tendrils curling in agitation. "They're manipulating space-time at a local level, but the energy requirements would be..." His voice trailed off as new data scrolled across his screen. "They're using the background radiation of space itself to power the transformations. How did they even think of that?" The swarm noticed the Thunder now. Their perfect formation rippled as the first scout ships broke away to investigate. The Council observers held their breath, remembering how quickly the swarm had torn apart other fleets. But this time, something different happened. The scout ships opened fire, their energy beams slicing through space toward the Thunder. But as the beams approached, the ship's hull plates moved in impossible ways, creating geometric patterns that caught the energy and redirected it harmlessly into space. It looked like an elaborate dance, the human ship moving with a grace that defied everything the aliens knew about space combat. "Multiple swarm ships are breaking formation," West announced on the Thunder's bridge. "They're trying to surround us." Walker nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Just as we expected. They think like insects, surround and overwhelm. But we think like mammals. Engineering, initiate defense pattern Delta." The Thunder's response left the alien observers speechless. Instead of trying to maintain distance from the swarm ships, it dove right into their midst. The hull plates continued their mesmerizing dance, each movement precisely calculated to deflect enemy fire, while allowing the ship to maneuver in ways that should have torn it apart. "The human ship's hull," one of the younger observers noted, "it's not just defending. Look at how the patterns change. They're studying the swarm's attack patterns in real time." Observer Lead Gray watched the battle unfolding with growing amazement. The swarm ships, used to fighting enemies that either fled or stood their ground, seemed confused by the Thunder's tactics. Their perfect formation began to show cracks as they tried to adapt to an enemy that refused to behave according to any known combat doctrine. "Send word to the Council," Gray ordered, his eye stalks fixed on the display. Tell them the humans fight like nothing we've ever seen. Their ship doesn't just move through space, it works with it, like a swimmer in an ocean." He paused, watching as the Thunder effortlessly evaded another wave of swarm attacks, "and tell them to revise their classification of human technology. We've been underestimating them." severely underestimating them. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the swarm appeared, the Council observers felt something they hadn't expected to feel again: hope. The humans might be young, but they fought with a creativity and adaptability that made their youth seem like an advantage rather than a weakness. Inside the Thunder's bridge, warning lights flashed as another wave of swarm ships closed in. Captain Walker gripped his command chair's arms, watching the tactical display with focused intensity. The enemy ships moved like angry wasps, their formations growing tighter as they tried to trap the human vessel. "They're adapting to our movement patterns," Lieutenant West called out, her fingers dancing across her console. "The swarm is learning faster than we expected." Walker allowed himself a small grin. "Good. That means they're paying attention. Engineering, initiate the next phase. Let's show them why we named our defense system after origami." The Thunder's hull shimmered as hundreds of plates began moving in perfect synchronization. What had started as simple geometric patterns now evolved into complex, flowing shapes that seemed to fold space itself. The ship's outer layer resembled a living thing, each plate adjusting its position with microscopic precision. From their observation post, the alien scientists watched in amazement as their sensors struggled to track the human vessel. "The energy readings are impossible," one of them muttered, his tentacles twitching nervously. "They're creating quantum-level folds in their defensive field, but the power needed for such manipulation." The Thunder spun gracefully through space, each movement calculated to turn the swarm's attacks against themselves. When energy beams struck the ship's folded defense fields, they didn't just bounce off. They were caught, redirected, and sometimes even amplified before being sent back toward their source. "Multiple hits on enemy vessels," the Thunder's weapons officer reported. "Their own energy weapons are causing significant damage when reflected back." The swarm responded by changing tactics, breaking into smaller groups and attacking from multiple angles. Their hive mind coordination should have made such complex maneuvers devastating, but the Thunder's crew had trained for exactly this scenario. "They think we're using pre-programmed defense patterns," Walker said to his bridge crew. "Time to prove them wrong. Helm, switch to manual control. Let's show them what human instincts can do." The Thunder's movements became even more unpredictable. Where before it had moved with mathematical precision, now it flowed like water, responding to attacks with the natural intuition of a skilled dancer. The ship's AI adjusted the hull plates to match the crew's improvisations, creating a perfect blend of human creativity and machine precision. In the Council observation post, the aliens struggled to understand what they were seeing. "Look at these maneuvers," Observer Lead Gray said, pointing at his display. "No sane species would attempt such tactics. The G-forces alone should be tearing that ship apart." "The humans aren't just fighting the swarm," another observer noted. "They're teaching us something new about space combat itself. Their ship doesn't fight against physics. It works with natural forces in ways we never considered possible." Back on the Thunder, the bridge crew worked in perfect harmony. Years of training in simulations that pushed the boundaries of conventional space combat were paying off. Each crew member anticipated their teammates' actions, adjusting their responses to support the ship's fluid movement through space. "Swarm ships are showing signs of confusion," West reported with excitement in her voice. "Their formation is breaking down. I think we're disrupting their hive mind communication with our defensive patterns." Walker nodded, watching as the enemy fleet's perfect coordination began to falter. The swarm had never encountered an opponent that could turn their own synchronized attacks into a weakness. They were learning that predictability, no matter how precise, could be a fatal flaw against an adaptable enemy. "Keep the pressure on," Walker ordered. "Engineering, push the origami system to maximum complexity. Let's give them so many patterns to analyze that their hive mind can't keep up." The Thunder's hull erupted in a dazzling display of moving geometry, each fold and transformation more complex than the last. The ship now resembled a living kaleidoscope, its surface constantly shifting in ways that defied prediction. Swarm ships began colliding with each other as their normally perfect coordination broke down in the face of such chaos. From the safety of their observation post, the alien scientists were frantically recording everything they saw. They had thought they understood the principles of space combat, but the humans were rewriting those principles before their eyes. The thunder wasn't just surviving. It was turning the very concepts of space warfare into an art form, proving that sometimes the most effective weapon was the ability to think in ways your enemy couldn't understand. The Council's chief scientist slammed his hand on the desk in frustration. His team had been analyzing the thunder's movements for hours, and nothing made sense. The human ship was pulling off maneuvers that violated everything they knew about space combat. "Look at this," he called to his colleagues, pointing at a holographic replay of the battle. "The hull doesn't just bend. It flows like liquid metal, but it's stronger than any material we've ever encountered. How are they doing it?" On the main screen, they watched as the thunder performed another impossible turn, its hull rippling like waves on a pond. The swarm ships fired continuous beams of energy, but the human vessel's defense system caught each attack in geometric patterns that seemed to defy physics itself. "They based it on sea creatures," one of the younger scientists said quietly, earning surprised looks from the others. "Earth's oceans. They're learning from their own planet's life forms. Look at how the ship moves. It's exactly like their deep-sea animals." Meanwhile, aboard the Thunder, Captain Walker and his crew pushed their ship to its limits. The bridge hummed with energy as the revolutionary hull system adapted to each new swarm attack. Warning lights flashed across every console, but the crew remained focused on their tasks. "Captain," Chief Engineer Davis called from engineering, "the hull's quantum field is holding stable, but these maneuvers are putting incredible stress on the system. The biomimetic processors are working overtime to maintain integrity." Walker watched as another wave of swarm ships approached. "Can we hold together?" "The hull is actually getting stronger," Davis replied with amazement in his voice. "The neural learning network is improving its response times. It's like the ship is learning from each attack, just like we designed it to." In the observation post, the alien scientists continued their analysis. They had brought in experts from dozens of species, yet none could fully explain how the human ship survived. The Thunder's movements should have turned its crew into paste, but somehow they remained alive and fighting. "They're inertial dampeners," one expert noted. "They're not just counteracting the G-forces. They're working with them, using the energy to power their defensive systems. It's brilliant. They're turning the varied forces that should destroy them into a weapon." The swarm launched another coordinated attack, this time with over 50 ships firing simultaneously. The Thunder's response left the observers speechless. Instead of trying to dodge, the ship's hull transformed into a complex series of geometric folds that caught the incoming energy and channeled it through its quantum field. "Energy readings are off the scale," West reported from her station on the Thunder's bridge. "The origami system is successfully capturing and redirecting 90% of their attacks." Walker nodded, studying the tactical display. The swarm's attacks were becoming more desperate, less coordinated. Their hive mind couldn't predict what the Thunder would do next, because the ship's defensive patterns never repeated exactly the same way twice. Back in the observation post, the chief scientist suddenly straightened up, his eyes wide with realization. "That's it. The humans. They're not just using advanced technology. They're combining it with unpredictability. Their ship's defense system isn't running on pure mathematics. It's incorporating chaos theory." His colleagues gathered around as he explained further. "Look at the pattern variations. They're like jazz music in physical form. The basic structure is there, but each performance is unique. The swarm can't adapt because there's no single pattern to adapt to." The Thunder continued its dance through space, its hull flowing and shifting in ways that made the observer's eyes hurt to watch. The ship no longer looked like a vessel of metal and energy. It moved like a living thing, each motion smooth and purposeful. "The humans have done something we thought impossible," the chief scientist said, his voice filled with wonder. They've created a perfect blend of organic and geometric principles. Their ship doesn't fight against the natural forces of space. It works with them, like a fish swimming through water. As they watched, the Thunder executed another series of impossibly smooth maneuvers, its hull rippling with patterns that seemed to bend reality itself. The swarm's attacks became increasingly chaotic as their hive mind struggled to compute effective countermeasures against an enemy that refused to follow any predictable pattern. The observers realized they were watching more than just a battle. They were witnessing the birth of an entirely new approach to space warfare, one that would change their understanding of what was possible forever. The Thunder shuddered as another volley of swarm attacks slammed against its defensive fields. Despite the ship's incredible performance, Captain Walker could see the strain beginning to show. Warning indicators flashed across multiple stations, and the crew's faces showed growing concern. Hull integrity at 60%, Lieutenant West reported, her voice tight with tension. The swarm is learning to concentrate their fire on points just before our defensive patterns shift. They're starting to predict our movements. Walker studied the tactical display, watching the enemy ships move with renewed coordination. The Thunder's unpredictable maneuvers had confused them at first, but the hive mind was adapting. They needed something new, something the swarm couldn't calculate. "Sir," called out Jack, the tactical officer, his eyes fixed on his screen. "I've been watching the local star's behavior, its magnetic field. I think we might be able to use it." The bridge fell silent. Even the ship's eye paused its calculations, processing this unexpected suggestion. Walker turned to face the young officer. "Explain." Jack's fingers flew across his console, bringing up a diagram of the nearby star. The star's throwing off massive electromagnetic pulses. If we can time our movements right, maybe we can use the Thunder's hull to amplify those pulses, turn them into a weapon. In the Council observation post, the alien scientists noticed the human ship's sudden change in behavior. The Thunder had shifted its position, angling itself in a way that seemed to make no tactical sense. "What are they doing?" Observer Lee Gray wondered aloud. "They're leaving themselves exposed. The swarm will tear them apart." But the humans had seen something the others hadn't. The Thunder's hull began to shift into new configurations, its quantum-folded plates arranging themselves into patterns that resembled massive solar sails. The star's energy began to interact with the ship's defensive fields in ways the sensors couldn't quite track. "Captain," Chief Engineer Davis called from engineering, "if we try this, we'll be pushing the hull's molecular bonds to their absolute limit. The quantum field calculations alone are giving our eye a headache." Walker looked around at his crew. They had trained together, learned together, and now they were about to attempt something that no ship had ever tried before. "Sometimes the best calculations come from human instinct," he said. "Jack, coordinate with engineering. Everyone else, prepare for emergency maneuvers." The Thunder's hull continued its transformation, each plate adjusting its position with microscopic precision. The star's electromagnetic field began to visibly distort around the ship, creating waves of energy that rippled through space. "The humans have gone mad," one of the alien observers muttered, watching his instruments go haywire. "They're trying to harness a star's magnetic field. The energy involved. It's like trying to catch a tsunami with your bare hands." But that was exactly what humans had always done best, attempting the impossible because they didn't know it was impossible. The Thunder's crew worked in perfect synchronization. Their minds and machines joined in a dance of precision and intuition. "Energy buildup at critical levels," West announced, her fingers flying over her controls. "The hull is acting like a giant antenna, but sir, the power readings are beyond anything we've tested." Walker stood from his command chair, watching as the space around his ship began to twist with visible distortions. The swarm ships were moving in for the kill, not realizing they were flying right into a trap. "Now," Walker commanded. "Engineering, release the stored energy. Helm, full evasive pattern." The Thunder's hull blazed with light as it released the captured stellar energy in a massive electromagnetic pulse. The wave expanded outward, enhanced and shaped by the ship's quantum-folded plates. When it reached the swarm ships, their perfect formation suddenly wavered. "Direct hit," Jack called out excitedly. "The pulse is disrupting their hive mind communication. Their ships, they're losing coordination." The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the swarm fleet began to break apart. Ships that had moved with perfect precision now drifted aimlessly or collided with each other. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned a star's natural energy into a weapon against an enemy that relied too heavily on technological perfection. "They didn't just think outside the box," the chief scientist whispered, watching the battle unfold. "They forgot there was a box in the first place." The space around the Thunder glowed with waves of electromagnetic energy. The ship's hull plates shifted constantly, catching and amplifying the star's power while the crew fought to maintain control. Warning alarms blared throughout the vessel as systems struggled under the immense strain. Hull temperature reaching critical levels. West shouted over the noise. "The quantum field is barely holding together." Captain Walker gripped his chair tighter as the ship shuddered. Around them, the disabled swarm ships drifted in chaos, their hive mind connection scattered by the first electromagnetic pulse. But it wasn't enough. Some were already beginning to recover, their systems adapting to the disruption. "We need to hit them again," Walker said, studying the tactical display. "But stronger this time. Engineering, what's our status?" Chief Engineer Davis's voice crackled through the comm. "The hull is still intact, but these energy levels, Captain, if we try to channel any more power through the quantum field, we might tear ourselves apart." The tactical display showed more swarm ships regaining coordination. Their movements were sluggish, but they were learning to shield themselves from the electromagnetic interference. Time was running out. "Jack," Walker called to his tactical officer, "you got us this far. What else can we do with that star?" Jack's fingers flew across his console as he studied the sensor readings. "The star's magnetic field is growing more unstable. If we time it right, we could ride the next solar flare, use it to create an electromagnetic tsunami." In the observation post, the alien scientists watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. Their instruments showed the human ship positioning itself dangerously close to the star's corona, its hull glowing brightly against the stellar background. "They'll kill themselves," Observer Lead Gray muttered. "No ship can survive that close to a star during a solar event. The radiation alone." But the Thunder's crew had planned for this. The ship's hull began transforming again, its plates arranging themselves into patterns that mimicked the star's own magnetic fields. It was like watching a leaf align itself to ride a hurricane. "Solar flare building," West reported, her voice steady despite the danger. "Impact in 30 seconds. Walker looked at his crew, seeing the determination in their faces. They all knew the risk, but they also knew this might be their only chance to stop the swarm for good. "Engineering, divert all power to the hull's quantum field," Walker ordered. "Everyone else, brace for impact. We're about to surf a star." The solar flare erupted, a massive wall of plasma and electromagnetic energy rushing toward them. But instead of trying to shield against it, the Thunder opened itself to the star's power. The ship's hull plates spread out like the wings of a giant manta ray, catching the wave of energy. The alien observers gasped as their sensors overloaded. The human ship was doing something that defied their understanding of physics. It was using its quantum-folded hull to shape and direct the solar flare itself. "Impossible," the chief scientist whispered. "They're not just riding the wave, they're steering it." Inside the Thunder, the bridge crew worked frantically to maintain control. The ship vibrated violently as it channeled forces that could have torn apart a small moon. "Now," Walker commanded, "release everything we've got. Turn their hive mind against them." The Thunder's hull flashed brilliantly as it released the combined power of its quantum field and the solar flare. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the ship was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It swept through space like a tidal wave, engulfing the swarm fleet in its path. This time, the effect was devastating. Swarm ships didn't just lose coordination. Their entire network collapsed. Vessels that had acted as one mind for centuries suddenly found themselves alone, their crews unable to function without the hive mind's guidance. Direct hit across the entire fleet, Jack reported, his voice filled with awe. Their communication network is completely shattered. The hive mind, it's gone, sir. The observation post erupted in chaos as the aliens tried to process what they had just witnessed. The humans hadn't just beaten the swarm, they had broken them in a way that no one had thought possible. They turned the very fabric of space into a weapon, one observer said quietly. Not through brute force or advanced technology alone, but by understanding how to work with the natural forces of the universe itself. The thunder drifted quietly in space, its hull slowly cooling after the tremendous energy it had channeled. Around it floated the scattered remains of the swarm fleet, their ships now dark and silent. The battle was over, but its impact would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Captain Walker stood at his command chair, looking at each member of his exhausted crew. Their uniforms were soaked with sweat, their faces tired but proud. They had accomplished something that no other species had managed in centuries of space warfare. "Damage report," Walker called out, his own voice hoarse from shouting orders during the battle. Lieutenant West checked her readings. Hull integrity at 30%, but the quantum field is already beginning to repair itself. Main power at 40% and rising. No casualties. She paused, a small smile forming on her face. "We did it, sir. We actually did it." In the Council observation post, the alien scientists were still trying to process what they had witnessed. Their instruments had recorded everything, but the data made little sense to their traditional understanding of physics and space combat. "Look at these readings," the chief scientist said, gesturing at his screens. "They didn't just defeat the swarm. They completely rewrote our understanding of what's possible in space warfare. The way they use the star's natural energy, the quantum-folded hull design, the integration of organic movement patterns." Observer Lead Gray nodded slowly. "We've been exploring space for thousands of years, building bigger ships, stronger weapons, more advanced shields. But the humans," he shook his head in wonder. "They looked at space itself differently. They saw possibilities we never imagined." The council chamber buzzed with excitement as news of the victory spread. Species that had lived in fear of the swarm for generations could hardly believe that a single ship from Earth, the youngest member of the galactic community, had succeeded where entire fleets had failed. Back on the Thunder, Chief Engineer Davis called up from engineering. "Captain, you need to see this. The hull's neural network, it's evolved. The battle pushed it beyond our original specifications. The quantum field is showing patterns we never programmed into it." Walker made his way down to engineering, where Davis showed him the readings. The ship's defensive systems had learned and adapted during the fight, creating new configurations that the design team had never anticipated. The Thunder hadn't just survived the battle, it had grown from it. "Send all the data to Earth," Walker ordered. "Every reading, every adjustment the system made. This could change everything we know about ship design." The Council's emergency session was already underway when the first detailed reports arrived. The gathered representatives watched in stunned silence as holographic displays showed how the human ship had transformed the physics of space itself into a weapon. "We called them primitive," one council member said quietly. "We looked at their short history of space travel and assumed they had nothing to teach us. We were wrong." Another member stood up. "Their victory wasn't just about technology. Look at how they fought. The creativity, the willingness to try the impossible. They turned their youth and inexperience into advantages." In the observation post, the scientists had finally begun to understand the true significance of what they had witnessed. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had shown the galaxy a new way of thinking about space itself. They see space as an ocean. The chief scientist explained to his colleagues, where we try to impose our will on it, they work with it. Their ship doesn't fight against natural forces, it dances with them. It's beautiful, in a way we never considered warfare could be. As the Thunder prepared to return to Earth, Captain Walker received a message from the Council. They were officially upgrading Earth's classification from developing species to advanced civilization. More importantly, they were requesting that humans share their unique perspective on space travel and combat with the rest of the galaxy. "What should I tell them, sir?" Lieutenant West asked as she received the message. Walker looked out at the star that had helped them achieve victory. "Tell them we'd be honored to teach what we know, but also tell them we're still learning ourselves. That's the real secret of humanity's strength. We never stop looking for new possibilities." The Thunder's hull shimmered one last time as it prepared for the journey home. In the darkness of space, its quantum-folded plates caught and reflected starlight in patterns that seemed to defy physics itself, a testament to what was possible when creativity and courage combined with the willingness to see the universe in a new way.